Thursday, Friday, 188. Then I got to the nurse's office on Monday, and it was 211. She called 911. So got to the hospital, it was 220. Got into bed, and it came down to 165. So they watched me for a while and sent me home, which I'm not very happy about. But anyway, well, I am because this is my hospital. My primary care, my cardiologist are here at this hospital. So.
Oh, good. Well, I think when
Anyway.
you take a diuretic, don't you pee an awful lot? Don't you have to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they didn't give me one yet today, so I should be able to make it through this. But if all of a sudden I disappear, I'm leaving a deposit somewhere.
But do us a favor. Just shut the bathroom door and mute your phone when you go.
Well, as an old friend, she was a priest housekeeper. Actually, came to our house when we were young, and she'd say, "Oh, you have to." What did she say? She'd say, "Oh, you have to shed a tear." That was her word for going to the bathroom. Anyway.
So how is
we
Norm
that gone down?
Norm, your new one is. You shut off your old thing, Norm, because your new one is good.
I know. I'm taking care of that.
Only thing better is if you turn it from vertical to horizontal.
Yeah,
you get over, Norm.
Turn it horizontal. You'll see
there
everybody.
it is.
There you are.
Well done.
So Norm, is that Mohs surgery?
It was nose surgery, yes.
Yeah,
No.
but MOHS surgery.
Well, I don't know. All I know is they cut off part of my nose so they could heal it.
So did they go in once or twice?
Oh, just once.
Okay.
Took a slice off my nose and put a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah.
Probably not most.
And so let me to you, priests, happy St. John Vianney feast day today.
Yeah, he was a great guy.
Yeah.
Isn't he the patron of parish priests?
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about that as I was reading. I get this thing called Faith Notre Dame, which daily gospel reflection, saint of the day, and I thought of all of the sacraments that I participate in, I think the sacrament of reconciliation is just the most awesome, and I wonder why, unless it's become just a sacrament that people don't care to partake in. I wonder why confessions are not offered more frequently. So anyway, that's just at my parish is 1 hour a week, 30 to 10:30 on Saturday mornings. But in other parishes, I know the priest would do it like an hour before each mass and stuff like that. And so I just wish it was more frequent, because I think if it were more frequent, more people would say, I think I'll go to reconciliation. So
I'll have
anyways.
I have a simple answer to that. Priests are too damn lazy.
Oh,
You think so?
Yeah, that combined with a misunderstanding of Vatican II and the renewal of the sacrament that actually emphasized more the communal dimension, which people misunderstood as legitimizing sort of a fire hose approach rather than responding to the individual's needs.
So what do you mean by the communal approach, Tom? What do you mean by that?
Penance services.
Well, we used to have those, but we would have like 5 or 6 priests stationed around the sanctuary, and
right.
And it was okay. That's what you mean by that. Okay.
But they were only done a couple of times a year, and there was no chance for a meaningful presentation of one's own personal sinfulness. The best you could do was a what's the word I'm looking for? A recital of sins, brief enough that and thereby meaningless enough that the priest didn't get annoyed with you because he was looking back and seeing the line behind you.
Right.
There was really no chance for a personal encounter. You know, I think if you look at the matter and form of the sacrament of reconciliation, the actual sacramental sign is the encounter.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. The way that it was often routinized in the past, particularly with children being indoctrinated into the first confession thing, meaning that they had to come up with something and try not to pee their pants. No reference. Frank, what are you doing there?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We won't,
I'm
I won't tell
trying
you
to
what
see
it looks
whether
like.
I can get a bigger view, but anyway, yeah.
Didn't it feel
Forgive
like
me.
an absolution, Tom?
No, Tom was making a profound point. Forgive me.
I was. So, but you know, the catechesis, the childhood catechesis on Sacrament of Reconciliation basically was either that smudged milk bottle or the blackboard eraser. And unfortunately, even in the old pre-Vatican II church, you know, there was a lot more to it than that, which never really got into further catechesis. So I think most adults, you know, they basically had to go to confession late enough on Saturday night that they could at least, you know, refrain from sinning Saturday night before they went to Sunday communion. I'm caricaturing a bit, but
I think the whole thing's very confusing, to tell you the truth,
it is.
because you know, originally people went to confession once in their lifetime, and the fact that the king of the sacraments, if you will, the Eucharist, opens with a penance service where we ask for forgiveness of sins and are given it by the priest. And I think, beginning to think more and more, that traditional confession is morphing into spiritual direction, and over time.
Started with the
So
Irish
if you've ever anointed anyone in the ritual, the first thing is, you know, and if they shall have any sins, they shall be forgiven them.
If they shall, yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, it seems to me that there's not a lot of clarity exactly in where the sacraments come from and where it's going and what its relationship is to these other sacramental rites which forgive sins.
Right.
And you know, Frank, I also think, and the rest of you guys, that the Mass, the Eucharist, the liturgy since Vatican II also has repositioned the penitential rite, the opportunity to become aware and confess one's sins, where it rightly belongs, right within the communal celebration of the Eucharist. You know, starting with the penitential rite, and then the number of places in the liturgy where there is an opportunity to pause and ask for forgiveness of sins.
But you know, that does not suffice for satisfying my need as a sinner to unburden myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
You know,
That's right, Tom.
and that's the aspect that we've that I think we've let fall by the wayside.
Right.
And most I would say most Catholics aren't even really aware of the opportunity to unburden yourself in a way that you know that the Lord has, you have outward signs that the Lord has received, forgiven, and I always emphasize healed your sinfulness. And we need to do, we need to do more of that. One of the things that I think, I see as a trend is that more and more parishes and more priests are willing to schedule more convenient and available times for confessions.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think makes it closer to spiritual direction, which I think we all agree is the real core piece that we're talking about.
I don't think so. It does kind of, in the sense that spiritual direction is basically accompaniment along the way. Confession is essentially unburdening yourself. And they are related, but they're distinct.
Okay, good distinction. Thank you.
But it's a healing encounter, confession is.
Yes.
Hi,
Gary.
And it seems to me that, when I was first ordained, I was thinking back to my first shift, how my thing was that how God could use such an imperfect vehicle to bestow his grace on people and his forgiveness. And then 40 years later, I came back and I heard confessions. And one day I didn't leave the confessional. I just sat there saying, my God, what faith these people have.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Yeah, you've shared that before, and I think that's a very powerful statement, Frank. Now, remember, you're saying that you just kind of like were stunned by the faithfulness of the people that came in, or the belief systems. Yeah. Hey, Gary, how are you, kiddo?
Hi, Gary.
Morning.
I gotta go for about 5 minutes, so y'all continue.
Taking a diuretic like Frank?
No.
Okay.
We had the
Gary,
roof.
real quick.
I got one on my
catch-up.
arm.
We had the roof redone this week, and the inspector is here along with the boss of the company. So
Gary Lombardi,
Yes.
we're talking about confession and spiritual direction. And
Well, it was in the context of the feast of St. John Vianney, and that
yes,
yeah,
parish priest.
Yeah.
In fact, the place where I live in Boston, there's the main statue outside approaching the building is St. John Vianney.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
He was very, he was noted for being a confessor.
He spent hours.
I'm not sure he did much of anything else.
I don't think so. I think they established a train to where was he in Ars?
Yeah.
Because of all the people who would come to him for confession. And I guess he had insights into people's lives, I suppose. I don't know. But yeah.
Bob Bono, how are you? Bob Bono, what are you up to there?
Well, I'm getting ready to go to Charlottesville, Virginia tomorrow. So that's what I'm trying to make sure I've got everything in place. It's for the Unbound.
There. What are you doing in Charlottesville?
The Unbound. I do masses down at the church there for the Unbound program. That's often what I do on many weekends.
Charlottesville is a beautiful place. Beautiful place.
Is that right? I've never been there. That's where they had that big attack on people.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to I just hope that you have got the chance to go over to the university. It is probably, Southern universities many of them are inherently beautiful places, but UVA in Charlottesville was designed by Jefferson, lot of the main buildings were built back in the early part of the 19th century. If you've got any chance, Bob, to drive over there, you must go. It's just, you won't believe how beautiful it is. Just gorgeous.
Yeah. Well, thank you for drawing that to my attention. I fly down, and then I will have Sunday afternoon pretty free. And there's a seminarian that apparently is at the rectory, and he's going to be getting me around to a few places. So I'll ask him if he can run me through there before he drops me off at the airport. I fly out at 6 o'clock. So I have several hours made, because the last mass is at 11, and I should be done by 1 with the stuff I have to do. And so I will make that a point to see if I can run me down.
So are you preaching it? Are you preaching at every mass?
Yes. Yep.
Which is how many?
There's 3 masses, I think. Let me get the paper.
It looks like he's walking into San Francisco Bay, doesn't it?
I
It
know,
did
is that
look
cool?
like that, yes.
Hey, why not? That's a commonplace. Yeah, they have a 5 o'clock Saturday mass, 8:30 and 11 o'clock, or 8 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday. And that's it.
Are you just giving the pastor a break, or are you
I don't know what that story is. He's not going to be there.
how do they contact you? I mean, are you on some sort of a list? Go around the country I mean, I do that here in the I mean, I'm going to be here 3 weekends in a row in Calistoga, helping one of our pastors out. But I mean, you go around the country and do it.
Yeah, I go around the country and do it. I do it in the diocese when needed. For example, last weekend I had 2 masses at 2 different churches that are pastored by one priest who actually is getting moved to another parish. But so he was away for something, so he asked me to cover the masses there. But with Unbound, it all happens. They call over a 3-year cycle. They try to call every parish in the country and see if they would be open to having a priest that serves Unbound, that we don't work for Unbound.
Unbound. Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and they so they call, and what happens often is the pastor wants to get away for some vacation, and so he says, "Well, send one of your guys down for this weekend."
He wants to be unbound himself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's more and more the case around I don't know how it is everywhere, but I think so many places, any pastor, is by himself, and many pastors have 2 or 3 churches they have to take care of.
Bob, I'm wondering, do any of them who invite you also give you some feedback? What themes are going on in the parish? Some sense of what's up that you can collect or connect with?
Not so much, because, for example, tomorrow I fly in, I'll get into Charlottesville at 1:30, basically. So they have to get me over to the rectory and then to the church, and there's confessions at 4 and there's a mass at 5. And so that doesn't give me much time to learn a whole lot about the place.
Sure.
And then, when we have to set up a display that identifies children and elderly persons in currently 17 different countries around the world that are looking for somebody to help them. And that's what we invite people to consider doing that. And most of the people just leave right away. And then there's a number of people that stay around the table, and there's some conversation there, but it's more about the Unbound program than it is about the parish. To the extent that I can ride with somebody and kind of pick their brain and ask them what's going on, how's the parish, blah, 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 then you can pick up some stuff with that, but it doesn't always happen.
Tom, let me interrupt. Did you ever hear back from Gary Kneier as to whether or not he was going to join us?
Yeah, he is planning to at 10:30, so we've got 2 minutes.
Oh,
And so how do we work this? What is your thought?
I don't know. Johnny, what's your thought?
we just want to hear. I just want to. Well, I'll ask him.
All
Tell
right.
me what.
Hi.
How are you?
Oh, remember? Good.
Yeah.
Well,
Can you,
Remind me
maybe
who he is.
No,
John?
I just sent the link with the invitation because there was consensus last
hold on,
week.
hold on.
I have no idea
John,
how.
can you
to
can you
handle.
mute me? Can you mute me for a minute?
You
I
can
gotta
mute.
visit. Okay, thanks. No, you muted.
Oh, I muted the wrong one. Okay, I'm sorry. Unmute yourself, Tim. And I
Can't
apologize.
hear you, Tim.
And I apologize that I didn't unmute myself. Tim, unmute yourself. I muted you by mistake.
I
There
think
you
you're gonna have to go to confession to Tim.
bless me, Tim, for I have sinned.
Sandra would love to have that power, Tom. Well, maybe what we could do is quickly go and introduce ourselves, because Gary won't know 3 or 4 of the guys that are on. And then, yeah.
And then I wonder if he.
So Johnny, quickly tell these new guys, or
Okay, Gary has entered the waiting room. So let's let him in and welcome him, and maybe then ask him to say a little about him. Well, we'll see what he has to say when he begins. Here he comes.
Oh, he's not on video.
We
Not
see
yet,
your name.
There he is.
There
There
we
he
go.
John.
Welcome.
Hello, Gary.
Hello, Gary.
Good to see you. Hello, everyone. Hang on a second. Let me get this on. Oh my God, look at this. It's
That's
been a
a
long time.
fabulous picture above your head. What is that?
There's a Aboriginal native artist in Canada named Roy Vickers. And he has a gallery in a place called Tofino on Vancouver Island. He's a prolific artist and does very meaningful stuff. This one says that storytelling is the ointment of the healer. So it seemed to fit, and I had it in my therapy office for many years.
Well,
so
anyway,
got storytellers all around you now.
yeah.
So let's.
But listen, I want to thank all of you for inviting me. I treasure this experience. And I also want to offer you my condolences about your loss of George Crook. Would be a loss for me too, but I haven't seen him for a long, long time. Anyway, thank you, and please accept my condolences.
Thanks.
And so
Just
let's introduce
before we
ourselves.
Came on, we were talking about maybe it would be a good idea if the 3, I think it's 3, whom you may not have ever met, to just give you a little thumbnail as an entree. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if any of you want
Maybe
to
the
catch
rest of
up
us-
on my journey, I'd be happy to say it. I see what I believe is Gary Lombardi in the lower right-hand corner. And we were right next to each other
Exactly.
for years since
I know.
our names are alphabetically adjacent.
I know. It's been. I have not seen you. I don't know when you left. Did you join the Capuchins? I forget. But you left the seminary and went somewhere else.
I went to the Trappists in 1962.
Okay. Were you in? Was it after our 6 years together? Is that?
Yes, after the 6th year, right.
Yeah. And you went to the Trappists.
Yeah, I went to the Trappist in Huntsville, Utah, and I was there for 6 years. And then when I came out, I was a bit of a lost soul, didn't know what I was going to do. So I went back to school, which I was always good at, and took psychology because I needed it. And one thing led to another, and I became a psychologist and a therapist.
Why not the priesthood?
What?
Why not the priesthood?
Why not? I did not really feel that was my calling and what I wanted to do. I really felt that I needed to find myself, and I was quite unconfident, lost inside, and actually it did not occur to me to go back to the seminary. I kind of felt, I don't know, that I needed to find myself and that my way would become clear. And psychology has been very good for me. I grew and I learned, and I was fortunate enough to get into a PhD program, and still did not know if I really wanted to be a psychologist or not. But it was good for me, and I was growing, and it's where I needed to be. So it was like putting one foot in front of the other, and I got an internship with Harvard at the Children's Hospital in Boston, and then completed my degree. And there, during my internship and shortly thereafter, it hit me that this is where I belonged, that I felt I knew what I was doing. I felt I had a gift, and I felt I could do some good this way. So it's been a wonderful career for which I'm very grateful.
And you know,
I
Gary,
still write, by the way, 1 day a week.
you know, you're the same impulse that motivated you to go into the seminary and then into the Trappist is the same impulse that got you into what you've done for all of your life.
That's very true. One foot in front of the other, and do what you need to do at the time.
Yeah.
And,
I mean,
and trust it and pray.
That's it. You know, God's always at work, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Sorry, Bob.
He's right inside of us, as it turns out.
Yeah.
Gary, the guy in the middle of the screen there is in Boston, so he probably would enjoy hearing your story. And so you three guys, Bob and Frank and Bob, why don't you introduce yourselves to Gary and tell him a little about yourselves? But no, you go first.
Yeah,
Bob Bonat,
my name's Bob Bono. I'm a retired priest now of the Diocese of Youngstown, Ohio. I've been a priest into my 56th year. I retired when I was 75. I'm now 82. In our diocese, they really don't. They needed priests, but they don't want the older priests that are still capable to be doing much at the parishes. Some parishes, one priest is in charge of several different parishes that are under one pastor, but there's fewer and fewer people that are coming to Mass. So what they're trying to do is consolidate an awful lot. So this is now 2 years ago, it might be 3 years ago, they retired 9 priests that were still active, wanted to stay active, but they were in their 80s and they put them off, and we had 1 priest ordained. So kind of a strange situation. So I don't have a whole lot to do here at the diocese anymore, but I do a lot of traveling to preach for the Unbound program, which it's a 44-year-old undertaking now that tries to help children in the poor countries of the world, 17 different countries right now. and elderly persons. And we try to get people to undertake to sponsor one individual that they would begin to pray for, and they would get a relationship going, and then they would provide some resources for them each month. So that's where I am right now, and I'm trying to clean up 55 years of stuff. We're in the basement, so I'm trying to get through them all, so that my nephew, which is I have an apartment at his residence, and I don't want to have him. I have to figure out what am I supposed to do with all this stuff. So anyway, that's what I'm about.
Wonderful.
Frank?
Admirable what you're doing, yes.
So Frank, you're muted. You're muted, Frank.
Unmute yourself.
Can't
Frank.
hear you. Ears, Frank.
Here I am.
There you go.
There you
There
are.
you go. Yeah.
Hi, Gary.
Hi,
I'm Frank Daly. I'm coming to you from a hospital in Boston, but that'll tell you how important this meeting is in all of our lives. I was ordained with Bob Bonneau, just spoke, and came back to Boston after 9 years in ministry. I took a leave of absence and married. And I was married for 37 years. My wife died in 2015. I have 2 children and 5 grandchildren. And I went back to Cardinal O'Malley and said, could I come back to the ministry? So at 72, I went in seminary for a year. And my papers worked their way through Rome. Well, they didn't really, because the first office in Rome, Doctrine and Faith, said no 3 times, but O'Malley wouldn't take no for an answer. So after the 3rd time, he had a conversation with Pope Francis, and Pope Francis told him take my papers from Doctrine and Faith and over to clergy, and then it happened. And I retired a year ago, June, after 5 years as pastor of a parish here in Boston. So.
my goodness, what a journey. Wonderful.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
but
Hey, Bob.
I think it was a little hard on my heart because I'm in the hospital now getting my heart taken care of. Too much fluttering.
Oh, really? You have atrial
No.
fibrillation?
No. I've got buildup of fluid. I've had open heart surgery, so all the complications. I don't have AFib. That's the one thing I don't have. So yeah.
Oh, good.
Now,
Well, it's nice to meet you.
Frank, is Irish whiskey offered at Brigham and Children's Hospital? Brigham and Women's? Do they offer
Women's.
that as a?
No, it's not an option here.
It's not.
But they write you a prescription for it when you leave.
Wonderful.
Okay,
Too
Bob.
Irish, yeah, Frank.
Charpentier. Gary, I have this book in front of me, which may look somewhat familiar. And it says this book is about the
Hold
human.
on, just let me.
This book is about the human spirit. It's about that invisible interior journey going on inside all of us as we seek meaning and peace of mind. And it ends with the sentence, you will find in this book that this search, this inner core, you will find that it is love. And I thumbed through the book. I was particularly interested in the section in science and spirituality. I got the book from George Ferrick, and he knows my background, and he told me about you, and I read a good part of the book, different sections. I've gone back to it now and then, and what I recognized was a kindred spirit. My journey is somewhat akin to Frank's. I was also in Rome and did my theology at the Gregorian, but I also spent a year in Louvain because of a medical break that I needed in there. But I was ordained
the Diocese of Worcester in Massachusetts. My interest ever since I was a young person, which I didn't know how to articulate it at the time, was the psyche. And as I got to understand that more and more, that looked like becoming a psychiatrist was the way to go. But I also felt I had a call to priesthood, and kind of waffled back and forth. And I am a Libra, so waffling back.
Oh my God, I didn't know
Waffling
that.
back,
Sure.
waffling back and forth comes very easily to me. And so seminary and or medical school, and it wasn't until I get into medical school in Boston that and they basically said, we need the tuition. And then I went, well, I got to get this seminary thing out of my system, and spoke with the local bishop. And I ended up studying theology and becoming a priest, like Frank, into my priesthood while I was doing graduate studies in Berkeley at the university. Also, the program was a PhD program in religion and psychology at the Graduate Theological Union, and yoked with the psych department and counseling psych departments at Cal. So I was moving all around in that, and did my PhD there. I met my wife to be, who was a physician with a practice in Berkeley. I have 2 children and 2 grandchildren. Very sadly, my wife died in 2010 of a terrible cancer. I kind of retooled at that point to take my interest and background in religion psychology, which practically was pastoral counseling in terms of being able to make a living. And I was on the staff of a counseling center working with clergy and clergy families in the denominations, which is a terrific experience. I retooled after Mary Alice died and did a fellowship, interdisciplinary fellowship in palliative care, hospice care at the Palo Alto VA hospital. It was really a premier training place on the West Coast, yoked with Stanford Medical School. And it was a terrific experience. And since then, I have been working sort of as in the field, connected with a Catholic parish, where I work as an elder care chaplain and with responsibilities for some hospice and palliative care as well. And unlike Frank, I didn't have a powerful bishop who could ask the Pope, but I went through a similar protocol within a few years of my wife's death, feeling the Spirit was calling me back to canonical ministry. I went through that whole process of reapplying to have my ordination recognized once again canonically, and it got turned down, as it did for Frank 3 times, but I had no recourse. And so I have had to pursue priesthood in an understanding that was fairly unique. Fortunately, I'm blessed with a Benedictine spiritual director locally who helped me work through. He was also a clinical psychologist, so it was also very good. That's basically my story. And in you, I recognize the kindred spirit. George Furrick said, "Say hello." Sorry he couldn't be here today, but he's going to review the tape.
And
Bob,
so did Ned Shavera.
Ned too. But Bob, you have also a 4-legged ministry.
I do. And my 4-legged ministry, I do I do volunteer work, foster care for guide dogs for the blind in Marin County. And I usually have a guide dog with me right now. Gibson, that's the last lovely yellow lab. A pleasant surprise for everybody. I suspect for him too. He was called to stud duty a few days ago, and as far as we know, he's happy having his first date, as they describe it.
Nice way
He's
to
going to
put it.
be there. Yes, it's a lovely way. I enjoy having dogs this way.
Right. Well, my goodness, so good to meet you. Maybe I should, since you've given very complete stories, maybe I should complete mine. After getting my PhD from Catholic University in Washington, D.C., in 1974, I came to Canada, mostly because there were no jobs available in Denver or Salt Lake City, and I wanted to be by the mountains because I'm an avid skier, always have been. So I came to Canada in 1974 with my then girlfriend. I got a good job up here, started a practice also. We married a year later. We have 3 daughters and 5 grandchildren. My wife Grace and I separated in 1993 after about 20 years together. Terrible time in my life. And I met my present wife Lorraine 2 years later, and we married in 1999. And we're very happy and growing old together.
Gary, where do you live?
I did my career and have lived for almost half a century in Calgary, Alberta, which is
Okay.
similarly located geographically like Denver. However, since we're avid skiers, and as I began to decrease practice from full-time to part-time, we bought a house in the Rocky Mountains in a little town called Fernie, where there is a major ski area. And as time has gone on, we've spent more and more of our time here in Fernie, which is where I'm at now. We still have a residence in Calgary. We rent a condo there. We sold our house there. And we still spend some time in Calgary, but most of the time we're here in Fernie. And we ski all winter, although last winter I had to give it up. I was diagnosed with some rare kind of muscle degeneration disease in my legs. And while I can still ski, I don't have any endurance, and I don't have the strength to ski the way I like to ski.
And when you say ski, Gary, you're talking about alpine, downhill.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm asking because I'm still a cross country, a Nordic skier, and
yeah.
And so, but in your 80s, you were doing downhill skiing. That's
Absolutely, yeah. And I still, this is also a mountain biking center. They've built trails all through the hills and woods out here, and they'll take you up on the ski hill if you want. And so about 4 years ago, I got a electric assist mountain bike, and I still do that almost every day during the summer, not in the winter. And in the wintertime, since I don't ski anymore and Lorraine isn't skiing as much as she used to, we may do the Canadian thing and become snowbirds, which means we would leave here for a couple months in the winter and go somewhere warmer.
gotcha. You're currently in Fernie?
I'm currently in Fernie right now, yes.
Yeah, I know that area, having done some cross country travel in the old days, starting in Vancouver and
All
taking
right.
Canada One to the East Coast, and but went through that area.
Well,
So
you know how stunningly beautiful it is. And
it's the heart, yeah, beautiful, beautiful Rocky Mountain area.
yeah, yeah.
Well, Gary, I remember in high school, you had a ski boat and you used to come down to Long Beach and Crowell and Gatlin and maybe Johnny, we would go to Marine Stadium. And I think your dad had a really great ski boat with a big cruiser on the back, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, we used to go. Yeah, I was always envious because my dad had a ski boat with the Johnson motor and yours could do circles around the one that we had. So that's my memory, because when they said that someone had contacted us, and well, I remember we were water skiing at Marine Stadium a lot and going out into the ocean. And I haven't heard from or about you since back when I left after high school. So it's great to hear from you and see that you're still skiing.
Well, I'm not skiing anymore. I did a video last year of skiing on my 81st birthday. I may, and I called it my last ski, but I may give it a try next March when I'm 82, just to say I did it. But it'll just be one run down the lower mountain.
And so, guys, it seems like Kneier is like a year older than us, because Tom, aren't you still 80? Aren't you still 80?
I'm still 80, yeah.
Yeah,
Next
but
week.
you'll be 81 this year. We were all born
Yeah.
in 1942, right?
Right,
Right.
right.
I'm
Yeah.
81 already.
I'll be
Yeah.
81 in November. I'm the youngest.
Yeah,
Believe it or not.
Ned, what happened
Stretch-
to your nose?
Stretch your imagination. Oh,
Norm, he
talking
wants to
about-
know what happened to your nose. Norm, tell him about your nose.
Well, I got a little cancer in there, and the doctor said she had to cut it out. So she cut it out and put a Band-Aid on it.
Oh, squamous cell, no doubt.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, I go to the dermatologist every year, and I've had one small basal cell, but he's forever removing the cellular changes, the actinic keratosis.
Right.
Yeah, I know all about that.
Yeah, yeah.
I've
And
had
so,
them
Gary,
all too.
And they're done.
Gary, have you who in our class have you sort of stayed in touch with over the years?
John Bremer, really, and he put together 5 or 6, 7 years ago a meeting with Ted Howard. So Ted and John and George Crook and Norm Supanchek, and I think Tom was there. Yeah.
I was there, Bob Davis.
Tom was there.
Yeah. Yeah, we met down in Laguna at Ted Howard's place, and other than that, I was in California in April when I saw Ted and John in Irvine just for lunch. But,
okay.
I really haven't been in touch with anyone, and I'm delighted to be invited to this group.
I'm curious about your writing. You've got 2 books published. Are you looking or thinking about another?
Of course, I'm always thinking. I'm always thinking of one. Whether I'll do it or not, I don't know. Maybe if we get another round of COVID and I have to be a hermit, maybe I'll do it. But no, I do. I do feel like writing another book on something to do with reinterpreting the Christian stories to fit what I know about the human journey, the human mind, and the human condition. I think that our story, our doctrine, if you will, is a very important and powerful, obviously, analogy and symbolism for very important things within our spirit. This is apart from whether or not they're objectively true. I would want to write a book kind of based on my experience that these stories can be very salutary and very healing symbols and rituals and metaphors for issues that reside deep in the human spirit.
Sounds awesome.
That I would like to make that more like to make that insight more explicit. I'm sure that most of you and most people who arrive at any kind of meditative or contemplative prayer are aware of this. But the need to adhere rigidly to an purported objective, distinct reality outside of us seems to lead to all kinds of problems and divisions, and which, of course, I'm not trying to badmouth that. We need that. It's part of our human condition. But still, I feel like I might want to write some more things about what it's doing, how it is coming from the human spirit and what it is saying about our own personal journeys.
I enjoyed the way you put it with stories because I'm just into Dwight Eisenhower's book, which is called At Ease, Stories Tell to Friends. And so it's a couple hundred stories of interactions.
Nice.
All the way back to his family, to West Point, all the way. But he, I think, had a similar insight that before his time was done, he wanted to share the many stories that he's encountered. So I'm happy to hear you say that.
Did you hear that
Gary,
Trump is going to have one of those books come out soon too?
Shut the fuck up.
Gary, in the 70s, I did summers at the University of San Francisco doing theology. And my roommate was a priest from Calgary named Dennis McDonald.
Did you know a man named George Fowler?
No.
He
Dennis.
No, I did not know Dennis.
Yeah, he died some years ago. Yeah.
But George Fowler was a monk in the monastery I was in. He went to University of San Francisco.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In fact, when I came out of the seminary in 1968, both my little brother Andy and George Fowler were at USF, and they tried to get me in there, but all of their connections were away on vacation because I came out in August. So I went over to St. Mary's in Moraga.
Yeah.
They welcomed me with open arms, accepted my credits from both the seminary and the monastery, and I was able to get a bachelor's in psychology in 1 year.
Oh, good. Yeah.
But no, I didn't know this Dennis.
Okay.
Gary, how did the Trappist experience shape you?
How did it shape me?
Yeah.
There's both a spiritual and a psychological answer to that. I'll give the psychological one first. It allowed me, in the guise of holiness and spirituality, to regress almost to an infantile state and to experience in my devotional life all kinds of attachment experiences that I badly needed psychologically. It also allowed me to escape. I mean, I ran away essentially. You could not have convinced me of that at the time, but on hindsight and being an analyst, I can tell you that I ran away and I needed to. And that 6 years, I experienced first all kinds of internal devotional
now
kinds of
This goes
experiences.
till 3 o'clock. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay, thank
I experienced all kinds of devotional experiences that were very important and allowed me to grow up. And then came the dark night and depression. I saw a psychiatrist. I was in a terrible bind. Did not know what to do. Renewed my temporary vows because I couldn't bring myself to do the permanent vows. And eventually, I knew that I needed to leave. On a spiritual level, it led to the kinds of experiences that later on I've put in the book I wrote, where I experienced contemplative prayer. I had an experience of being itself. I had an experience of the kind of consciousness that comes when thinking stops. And that too has saved me. And it also provided a platform for what I did with my life, which was to become an observer and a reflector on the machinations of the human mind, the emotional and psychological programs and conditioning that happens inside of every human and can lead to various kinds of symptoms and psychological distress. So it helped me on both of those levels, and personally, it was an important part of my journey.
Do you think that sitting by Lombardi all of those years may have had something to do with your running away?
That would make sense. Yeah, I think.
No, actually, I have only good memories of Gary. Not only were we kind of joined at the hip there, we both had the same first name. So
Yeah.
I don't remember that we were particularly close, but I certainly remember him and have only good memories, really.
So one of the things,
I do not have negative. I do not have negative memories of my seminary days. In fact, one reason I'm delighted to be part of this meeting today is that seems well known in my field that the friendships that one makes in early adolescence tend to be very lasting and to be formative. And
one of the things that we have most enjoyed is that, you know, I live in North Carolina, and so I had not seen some of these guys for 50, 60 years. And so we've been doing this for a couple of years now. And I came out to LA last month to see George before he died and spent a day with Norm traveling around Long Beach and had lunch with Tom and sadly missed seeing Johnny. But it's been an amazing journey that I think every one of us on this screen have had in how you can reconnect after 50, 60 years, at least for me. You know, now some of you guys have seen each other since then. And then we've got these three guys, you know, Bob and Frank, who sort of broke into the group and had not left. It's kind of like, look who came to dinner kind of thing, and they just never left us. But Gary, you mentioned
As I
how
recall, George Farrick was kind of the instrumental one in bringing the three of you on, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah, well, George Ferrick and Bob and I were classmates in Rome. Bob
Right.
Charpentier was a year ahead of us.
And then the other one is Fred Lawrence, who
Right.
has a close connection with all of us in the seminary, but a year ahead.
Yeah.
And has tangentially, I don't know, touched everybody, I think, in some way.
Yeah.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, Fred is our
If
rock.
I can
Yeah.
interrupt for just a second, as I look around this group and think of Ned and George Crook and Fred Lawrence, the common denominator, I think, that makes this a significant part of it anyway, is listening skills. I've encountered folks who are great talkers, but not such good listeners. And I'm just blessed and joyful about the listening skills of this group.
Well said.
Awesome, John. Awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, listening and asking questions is so important. So how many of you are still in the priesthood? And
I am.
And I am.
Yeah.
I'm in my second shift.
that's wonderful.
And
That's
I
wonderful.
am, even though I'm not canonical, I continue to identify with
Exactly.
my
Exactly.
priesthood.
Gary, after you left, I went on to study theology at St. John's. And in my last year, I hesitated at becoming a deacon. I went through a personal crisis of conscience and confidence. I didn't think that I was ready, and I didn't think I was worthy enough. And I was right on both things. But then I realized, so I passed up becoming a deacon, and I ended up being what is called a subdeacon, which no longer exists as an order in the church. And I had no title, what they call title to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. But it was shortly after that I said to myself, I'm not worthy and I'm not ready, but nobody else in my class is either. And I decided, and I remember talking to Al Kroll one time, who had gone on to become a deacon. And I remember Al saying that he was quite sure that very shortly celibacy would change, that there would be a change, in the church's practice of celibacy, and we could get married. And I said, Al, you're blowing smoke. I mean, I said, that's not going to happen. I thought to myself, I'm more ready than he is, if that's the case. But as it ended up, I thought that I would. I asked for my class got ordained, and I had asked to work in a parish, and I went to Our Lady of the Assumption in Claremont with Bill Berry. And I remember walking into that parish, and within a day or two, I said, I was made for this. I was made for this life. And I had a wonderful summer there with Bill. And then I applied to come back to the seminary and was told by Monsignor Hawks that I had no vocation for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, but I would be recommended to any of the dioceses that I wanted to go. And I remember in that meeting, he reached for the phone and he said, Monterey could use a good young man like you. And he was going to talk to whoever it was in Monterey. And I said, Monsignor, from this point on, I'll make my own decisions about my life. And I ended up coming north to the Diocese of Santa Rosa, where I've been a priest. Now, I was ordained in 1969. And it's, just the way you feel about, you got into psychology and you realize this is where I need to be. That's how I feel. you know, the priesthood, the parish priesthood. And I always felt this, you know, I remember in the seminary, there were guys that were called into special work. They call it special work, you know, might be education or whatever. And I used to get the impression that, well, if you couldn't do special work, we'll stick you in a parish. And I always felt, and I still do to the core of my being, that parish priesthood requires real skill. There was a guy in Oakland named Dan Danielson. Dan was a very bright guy in the Diocese of Oakland, and Dan was one of these universal priests. He was all over the country. He was he was editor of the Catholic Voice, which was the diocesan paper for the Oakland Voice. And Dan was an expert on everything, and he gave retreats and talks all over the country. And he finally became a pastor. And he told me one day, he said, you know, being a pastor has stretched every skill that I have, every one of them. Dan, of course, could talk about collaboration. He just couldn't quite do it, but because he was very confident in his own right. But I always felt that the priesthood, so it's been a wonderful life. Even though for a while I thought I was exiled from the big city of, you know, Los Angeles, and ended up in Podukville in the Santa Rosa Diocese. But it's been a wonderful experience. But I retired in August of 2017, and I'm very happy. And I don't want to have any kind of responsibility that's ongoing. So I help out here and there. You know, I've got 3 weekends to help out in a parish. And the first time I ever did it, I said to people, you know, it's wonderful to celebrate with you without having to be responsible for you. So it's a great experience, you know, because you can celebrate Mass and you can enjoy that experience. You preach, and then you go home, and you don't have to worry about being in charge. So,
Well, that certainly resonates with me. I still practice 1 day a week on Wednesdays, only remotely on Zoom or FaceTime. And I let word out 2-3 months ago that I was no longer taking new clients, but that I would continue to see my present clients and anyone who has seen me in the last 8 or 10 years.
Wow.
Well, it's like a ministry, I tell you. I mean, the phone keeps ringing, one or another, and I still see, 4 to 6 people every Wednesday.
wow.
And I don't know how long that'll go on, but it's like a ministry.
It is.
Yeah.
It is a ministry. Like I said, the same thing that sent you into the seminary is motivating you to be a psychologist.
Yeah.
It is. It's a same.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I remember one of the profs I had at Cal when I was in grad school there was also a Lutheran pastor, kind of an interesting, and so and he liked having some of the GTU related, Graduate Theological Union related students in the class, because we'd ask dumb questions and about the interconnection, religion and psychology and stuff like that. But in his regular psych class, one of the developmental ones, he used to speak about the psychologists as being the priests of the modern age.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that always stayed with me, and I went, there's something to that. They are the secular, quote, secular caregivers, the secular pastors, without any of the strings attached. Sorry?
It's hard to tell the difference between psychotherapy and spiritual direction at times.
It's yes. That's an area of interest to me that I've
hard to tell the difference between anxiety and depression and the dark night of the soul.
Gary, I'm very interested in one thing that you said. I mean, you said a lot of very interesting things. but this was when you were talking about your time with the Trappists, and you talked about experiencing being itself. Could you comment further on that?
I was studying my metaphysics at the time, and in Latin, and it was all about essay, you know, being and being itself and all that. And I was in the chapel, kneeling, I believe, before the Blessed Sacrament that was exposed, and looking at the host in the middle of the monstrance, and wondering what they were getting at, what this is all about. And I was thinking very hard. And but I was also staring at this image in front of me, the host and the monstrance, and thinking stopped.
Yes.
And I became aware of just being there. And since I was studying metaphysics at the time, it seemed like I felt and saw my essence and the essence of everything. I mean, it's hard to describe and put it into words, but it happened there.
Do you still do that?
It happens. It happens. Well, first of all, for the past up until COVID, for the 16 years prior to COVID, my wife and I went to Europe every Christmas to a monastery that has a decent Gregorian chant, which mostly is the Solem and its foundations, Fongambo. We also went to Silos. We went to, when we go to one in Italy, we usually went to a different one. There's one in La Grasse, France, we've been to 3 or 4 times. They're Augustinian canons. But there, it was like we were on retreat for a week. We didn't stay at the monastery, that'd be way too austere. We're down at the Holiday Inn or Airbnb or wherever. But we go there to retreat from the world, to stop, and I have contemplative experiences there. When I take communion, it happens, it always happens that all thinking stops and I vanish, and it's just, I'm just one with, well, hard to put a name to it, but call it the divine or being or the source of everything, hard to describe. And then, as time has gone on, it happens at some point almost daily. I often play Gregorian chant at night when I'm going to bed, or out riding my mountain bike, out looking over landscape and mountain scenes, skiing. I flew sailplanes during one period in my life, and it would happen when I was soaring and when I had become one with the air and the atmosphere. It would happen when I was skiing and I become free and one with the mountain and the terrain. It happens kind of whenever time stops and you're just there. I know for many people it happens listening to music or jogging or exercising. I mean, there's all kinds of ways.
It seems to me that experience does not come easily to most of us who are so bombarded by all of the worldly shit that's going on.
Right.
And that I'm wondering, listening to you, if that experience of the silence of the monastery for years and years was that kind of an effective training program for the contemplative experiences that you're having? I mean, can someone who hasn't gone through that, which I've never, I mean, it seems to me that would be such a phenomenal way of life, not the Trappist life, but the ability to kind of just shut it out, be in love with God, be in union with God, reach into your own soul, if that's the right way to say it. It seems to me that takes a lot of work that I would have no idea how to do that.
It doesn't take, you're not supposed to work.
Right.
It's
What do you mean? What do you mean? What
It's
do
a
you
letting go. It's a letting go of
there's
everything.
there's a method of prayer. I mean, I remember I would do like a school of prayer at our parish every so often, and I was reflecting on my own journey, and I used to say, like, I had three phases. First was if I were to ask to find prayer, it would be me talking to God, either through formal prayers or just. I remember one time in the seminary, it was late at night. I went out to the point. This is Gary. This is at St. John's in Camarillo. And we were on retreat. It was one of those nights where the Santa Ana winds were blowing, and it was a very bright night. And I went out by myself. We were on retreat. And I just started talking to God. I said, I don't know if you're here or not, or if I'm just talking to myself. And I just let myself talk out loud, and I just poured out, it's like that lonely old lady in the Book of Kings. I'm just pouring out my soul to the Lord, and so I would have defined prayer as talking. And then eventually I came to the point of thinking that prayer is more like listening, where you just, like you might read a scripture and I remember one time getting ready for a penance service in my first parish where I served up in Eureka as pastor. And I had that story of where they lowered the paralytic through this, through the roof. And as I was reflecting on that, I saw myself as the paralytic, and I saw Jesus looking down at me and saying, you're free, you can walk. And so I began to see scripture that way. And I think in preaching, we're always using the scriptures, and most of the time we're preaching to ourselves. We're talking about what's important to us. But eventually I got tired of talking and I got tired of listening. I just wanted to be with God, just to be. And that's where I came across this thing called centering prayer, which, was a result of some work from some Trappists over in with Thomas Keating and Basil Pennington, and that they developed, they got a hold of this with the book of The Cloud of the Unknowing, and they say it's that kind of contemplative prayer they put into a little package called centering prayer, which, Tim, is very simple.
Really?
It's very simple, yeah. It's not a lot of work. And it seems to me that the more you do it, just like Gary, your experience, the more you've experienced it, it happens to you throughout your day.
This conversation.
Go ahead, Bob.
Thanks, Gary. This conversation reminds me of one of the stories. It's the feast of Saint Jean Vianney today, and one of his parishioners used to come. It's a very simple person, and sit in the chapel every day for long stretches of time. And he did this week after week, month after month, year after year. Finally, Jean Vianney approached him and asked, told him what he observed, and he said, and what do you do there for these hours? And the guy, rather surprised, looked at him, and it sounds better in French, so if you'll bear with me, he said, je le regarde, il me regarde. I look at him,
He looks at
He
me.
looks at me. So
Sounds
he,
That's beautiful.
he had attained that level of what the
What is what Teresa?
divine prayer, the prayer of contemplation.
What
Just
Teresa?
no words, just simple being there in the presence. I look at God, God looks back at me. I look at him, he looks at me.
Did Teresa of Avila say contemplative prayers, wasting time with my friend who is God?
That was another variant, yeah.
Yeah.
Archbishop Hunthausen of Seattle, who was removed, you know, they gave him a hard time, so he went back to Montana, I think it was. And people would go to see him, and he'd be sitting outside, and they'd ask him, "Well, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm just sitting here and letting God love me."
Oh, wow.
That was it.
Yeah. There was a piece, I believe, in the NCR this past week or last week. He's in his 90s, and he's he's kind of withdrawn from all kinds of media attention and everything else. But the interviewer captured that spirit in the conversation with him. I was pleasantly surprised to describe he's still on the planet, to learn that he was.
Yeah.
Tim, I want to answer your question about whether there are exercises and work that one does to help quiet our minds and have this experience.
Thank you.
It's quite a paradox in our nature, but this experience, when it occurs, almost always is experienced as a gift, as a grace, as something that happens, and it tends to happen when all of our efforts and our work have failed. On the other hand, there are other traditions that have found that indeed there are exercises that help facilitate, having this experience. What Gary Lombardi said first about, it isn't something that you can do, and as long as you think that it is, you're going to probably be busy defeating it. On the other hand, it is true, Tim, what you say, that many of our minds, most, are extremely busy and are addicted to thinking because it's kind of the nature of our minds. And other traditions, Eastern traditions, have developed meditative practices. They're quite popular in our culture now and getting more popular. There's yoga. And almost all of these techniques emphasize paying attention to breathing and to your own body. In other words, focusing on just your biology, your biological rhythms tends to calm the human mind. There's also a lot of research recently in drug-induced ways that many religions and many traditions have practiced some kind of ingesting some kind of substance that tends to slow down our thinking and open us to this experience. Of course, we all know that that can also become quite an addictive problem and all that. But to answer your question, there are ways that can facilitate this. Then on the other hand, once it happens, one is aware that it's been there all the time, and I just never paid attention to it. And when I'm dealing with somebody with a very busy mind and who is tormented by that in some way, I usually try to find out where it is happening in that person's life, but they just don't know it. And often I'll find out that they love jogging, or that they listen to music, or that they love hiking in the wilderness, or that they go to yoga, or that it's swimming, or it's when they go to the seaside. It seems like the human mind does have this capacity. It's built in, and it comes out somewhere. And if we can find out where it comes out sort of naturally in us, and we begin to pay more attention to that, I think it enhances our ability to get away from our thoughts. And of course, the primary way used by psychotherapists is that we are able to divide ourselves into our mind and ourself. Like, we can observe our mind. Our mind, our thinking, is something that we do. Well, who's this we? Who's this observer? Who is it that is watching our thoughts? And of course, the more that one observes one's own thoughts, the more you become aware of the observer. And it's that observer that is apart from our thoughts and what is going on, that is what we're talking about when we're talking about contemplative experiences. Anyway, hope that answers your question.
I
Oh,
don't,
I also find that if you take time just to be quiet and just let yourself relax, let your mind relax, let your body relax, that there's times that we become very much in touch with those kind of spiritual things, those spiritual feelings inside of us. I love doing that, taking time just to unwind, relax, and be in the presence of God.
Yeah,
And so
just breathe.
So Norm, where do you do that? Do you go down to the beach, look out over the ocean, or go up to your cabin? Where is the best place that you're able to do that?
Wow, I do it in several places. Sometimes just in my own room, just sitting in a
Okay.
chair, just letting myself relax and be present to myself, what's around
I
me.
find, excuse me, Norm, but I find sometimes the car, when I'm alone in the car, is the place where it happens. And I
Sure.
also thought that I think as you get older, like Archbishop Hunthausen, is a very uncomplicated man, a beautiful man, actually. And this whole notion of putting the cares of the world, et cetera, aside, you know, there was a brother in the 18th century French brother named Lawrence of the Resurrection, who wrote a bit on the practice of the presence of God. And I think that's what Hunthausen was saying. And I also think that as you get old, like, for instance, one of the things I seriously considered coming back to the priesthood was going to a monastery. But I, came to the conclusion, A, I was too old, and B, it was a kind of a fantasy that you could, in fact, have this setting wherein, if you didn't have the discipline, the setting would kind of force you to develop this kind of prayerful union with God that you wouldn't have otherwise. And it seems to me that as I got older and began to think about it, and read a little bit like The Cloud of Unknowing and Lawrence of the Resurrection, that this listening, prayer as listening, or even more, prayer as presence, is kind of the way to go. And that and so I happen to be like, things in my car, I'll be driving along listening to something I'm interested in, and I'll get something will come to me and I'll shut it off and say, I have to be in his presence.
Have you read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle?
No.
That's a wonderful modern book about being in the now, just being present. and arriving at this state.
Yeah.
You know,
And
that
Gary, would you agree that this is a state that comes to one a little bit more naturally as you age?
Who was it? Aristotle and Plato said, a young man cannot be a philosopher. And it's probably also true of contemplatives. That's, I do believe that it comes more with age, yes.
The thing going through my mind right now for all of us is my very favorite birthday card, which quotes Picasso. It takes a very long time to grow young.
Isn't that true? Yeah, yeah.
Nice, yeah.
you know, I went to get a book, Tim. There are books on centering prayer as one method. It's meant to do all that, to quiet you down, to just to dispose you to the possibility. Like Gary, you're exactly right. You know, you don't say, well, now I'm going to make God present in my, God is already there. We just tend to kind of become aware of it. But I mean, you can't create the experience. All you can do is dispose yourself to be open by being quiet, and it's a very simple method. But I've been reading a book by a Catholic priest called From Hero to Servant to Mystic. And he quotes from a book that I'm going to probably get by a man named Martin Laird called, what's it called now? Yeah, I think it's called Into the Silent Land. It's about quiet, the prayer of quiet, the prayer of stillness, that sort of thing. So there are lots of resources out there, Tim.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
Well, I think that Tim, the way we were brought up is, for instance, we had this thing about prayer that used to be called acts: adoration, contemplation, thanksgiving, and supplication, petition. And we actually spent much more time on supplication. Prayer has been that with people asking for things, and very little in terms of developing the Thanksgiving, which Thanksgiving is kind of like just being there, you're not sending cards or whatever, and contemplation and adoration. If you actually took the four things, the three of them, the first three, which I find to be more important in life, are kind of a contemplative withdrawal, not a withdrawal, but a kind of standing back and engaging, encountering, etc. Whereas prayer, they don't get the emphasis in our tradition that they deserve. The emphasis is all on, what am I going to ask for God for next?
Yeah.
It's also
and I think
presence.
And a lot of noise. I mean, I think about my formative years is that to pray, and I'm not diminishing it. You had to have the rosary in your hand, or you had to have a prayer book. You had to be constantly saying something, either orally or mentally, and that there's a guy in my Cursillo group who is he's an old man. He's like 85.
Oh,
and he,
goodness. Ancient. Long way away.
Yeah. And he is a secular Franciscan, and he has really developed just a fascinating prayer life that he shared, which is he spends at least 2 hours every day quiet, just quiet. And he prefers, and one of the neighboring parishes has 24-hour exposition of the Blessed Sacrament. And so the first thing he does every morning, and he lives nearer to that church than he does to our church, is he goes and just sits there. And we say, Jimmy, what do you do? And he said, I just sit here. And so he is trying to teach us, how to just be quiet in God's presence. And so some of us have tried it. And in fact, one guy in particular tried it, and he said, I can't keep all these crazy thoughts out of my mind. He said, I'm not used to quiet. I'm not used to, as Charpentier said, looking at God and God's looking at me. He said, it makes me, I feel weird. I feel like I've got to be saying something all the time. It goes to your point, Frank, I think, is that a lot of our formation has been ask for things, talk, keep your mind going. And so it's really been a struggle for me to try and do this centering prayer, Gary, this kind of contemplative thing, because I feel like I've got to drown or drive every other thought out of my mind,
Have you-
What you can do, it's probably not possible to stop your mind from doing what it does.
We have
But what
monkey
you
brain.
But what you can do is watch it. You can observe it and wonder about it. And then there will be you watching this thing and doing whatever it does and not identifying with it. If you leave yourself and become the thoughts, then it's got you. But if you
that's
can
a good. I know what you're saying.
If you can stay observing it, and of course, if you begin to notice that the thoughts that your mind generates run in a couple of particular grooves, there's a few particular themes that your mind seems to love to chew on and think about, you can begin to watch that and to wonder why it generates these particular thoughts.
Yeah.
And then the lens through which I encourage people to look at their programs, their thinking patterns, the lens through which to look is twofold. Number one, whatever compelled kind of program or tape is playing in your head, it is an attempt by your mind to solve some painful problem. You begin to wonder, what problem might my mind be trying to solve in generating these particular kinds of thoughts and feelings? And the second lens is these thoughts and feelings, if they're compulsive or if they're repetitive, and they won't stop, then they're also memories. It's the mind is trying to tell a story about something in the past that needs to be told. What could that story be? And as you watch and as you observe, answers will come to those two questions.
You say that the story has to be told. What do you mean it has to be told?
Well, if you make an assumption, that the human mind is not crazy or erratic or random, you make the assumption that the human mind is actually a brilliant apparatus. And then you notice that it is going to extraordinary effort to generate particular patterns of thought and feeling, particular programs. There must be a good reason for that. And it turns out that very often the pattern was laid down long ago. It is a memory. And it is the mind. Why would the mind be going over and over and over this pattern? What story is it trying to tell? And of course, that's one thing that analytical therapists like me tend to do. We help to decode the disturbing pattern, mental pattern that's going on. We tend to try to help it to tell its story by decoding what it is saying about the past, and associated with that will be painful feelings that are trying to be managed in some way. Now, I'm not saying that you have those kinds of patterns. You might just have random patterns, but again, watching them and wondering about them increases your awareness of this part of yourself that is not your mind. And that's the part that we're all talking about. It's our spiritual part. It's our deeper consciousness.
You not just trying to blow smoke up your skirt. You've just made so much sense to me. It just seems so sensible what you've just said. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that insight. Yeah,
That's
and
interesting.
I think the key thing is to what, and I've never thought about what you're saying, Gary, is to kind of watch what you're thinking, because I'm having this deluge of memories, and more since I've joined this group, these memories and memories of what different paths, different journeys you could have taken. And I'm just kind of wondering where the hell are they coming from? Is it something I ate last night, or and typically, given I get up at 2 or 3 in the morning to take a leak, it's usually I come back to bed and these thoughts are there again. It's just kind of an old man kind of thing. So you've been very helpful to me. I appreciate that. I'll send you a bill.
So as you lie there in bed at night, and I've done this for years, and your mind starts, and you're watching it, one thing that helped me a lot was I would tell myself, well, my mind keeps chewing on this. It's trying to digest it. And as my mind, I began to notice that my mind would go to things that I regretted or mistakes I felt I'd made, and I would tell myself that my mind is chewing on it. It's needing to digest it. And then I began to notice how biased these ruminations were. They were all things that I was ashamed of, or that I was embarrassed by, or that I regretted, or that I felt was a deficiency in myself. And then I began to watch that, and I began to watch the bias. And then after a while, I began to wonder why my mind was resisting so much positive thoughts about myself. Why wasn't my mind going over the good things I'd done? Why didn't I think of that? Why isn't my mind chewing on that? And little by little, it led to a whole lot more peace inside and a better view of myself.
Interesting.
That's fascinating. I've read various things. I've read spiritual writers saying, well, if your mind is distracted all the time, maybe you need to make the distractions the focus of your prayer for a while.
Yeah,
and
good. Yeah.
Maybe
just watch it, observe it.
Yeah, maybe the same sort of thing too, And the other thing is that, in the centering prayer, they say, Tim, you asked, how do you quiet that? Centering prayer, just you have a little one syllable word, evocative word, and when you notice that you're distracted, then you just use the word to kind of bring you back to be attentive to God. I was just thinking how different this is. Remember in the seminary, from high school on, when we had to get up in the morning and go into the chapel at 6 or 6:30 in the morning, kneeling on our knees for meditation. Point 1, point 2, resolution or whatever. And geez almighty, what we were given the worst introduction to meditative prayer that you could possibly imagine. It's like, so, and that's thinking. That's not contemplative prayer, that's thinking. I will think about point 1, point 2, and then who was it? you know, and you get so tired, you put your butt up against the bench, and somebody comes on, kneel straight up, you know. So
Yeah, be uncomfortable. Yeah.
Over the years, tailing off what you're saying, Gary, in terms of being comfortable, uncomfortable, it's taken me a long time, but one of the things I found that works for me is to have discovered what are the activities where I lose track of time. And that's a clue for me as to where I can go quiet and find silence. Thank you, Dad and Granddad and great granddad and my French Canadian ancestors who were gardeners. I inherited the love of being in the garden and watching things grow. And in all my years here in California, I've been blessed to be able to have a small backyard garden patch. And that's one of the places. I got several, but that's one of the places where I lose track of time. And I've also discovered that that's a place where prayer comes very spontaneously. And I've lost track of time. And it's really a very blessed experience. And sometimes that's over the mulch pile. Other times it's planting new seeds in my little greenhouse. Other times it's transplanting. Sometimes it's just sitting and watching stuff grow. I mean, literally watching the grass grow.
Seems to me at times that there's three things that separate us from awareness of the God within and without. These three things are time, judgments, and truth. The desire to grasp and to own the truth. Those three things seem to separate us from God and from each other. Anyway.
that's interesting.
On a totally different note, I just want to check in with Frank. How are you doing? How are you feeling, Frank?
I'm okay.
You've been stuck in this
I'm
one
going home
spot.
Huh?
You are going home tomorrow?
Yeah, they thought today, but then they started me on a new medicine and wanted to see how that worked out. So.
And so can your grandkids come see you, Grandpa?
They were here. They were here the other day.
Nice.
Yeah,
Good.
my daughter and my son's in Korea, and his kids are in Colorado. So, but my daughter and husband.
What's he doing? Is he there just on a temporary deployment, or has he been transferred to Korea?
A 9-month deployment.
Oh my gosh! And so did the family go?
No.
Oh wow. My son in the Army, he's got some friends who are temporarily deployed to Korea, and their families couldn't go either. It's really a hardship. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Wow.
Yeah.
So he was there for 9 months. He's 14. It makes me worry because he's 14 miles from the DMZ.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Tell him not to cross the line, Frank.
I asked him about that kid who crossed, and I said, Chris, could that ever have been, by accident? He said, absolutely not. We locked down for 30 days when we come here. We go through all of that. It was intentional, and it turned out that it was. So.
Yes.
Yeah, my son was at Fort Bliss. He was the provost marshal there, and he had heard about this kid, and so it was kind of a scandalous thing for the MPs and provost marshals to think that someone could just as easily walk across that boundary without getting shot.
Right.
It was So,
another soldier apparently. So he's actually. What happens is if a brigade goes and then comes back and there's someone left behind, he becomes the responsibility of the replacing brigade. So technically, he's the responsibility of my son's brigade. And but my son's a doctor, so he's basically not. It's the lawyers who are dealing with this. he's dealing with he's dealing with mental health issues, and as time goes on, drugs and STDs, that kind of stuff. So
I wish him well. Jay.
Yes.
he calls me from Korea,
Yes.
and I even, if my doctors are in and we can arrange it, he frequently gets on the phone. So
Oh, good.
anyway, thank you, Bob.
Yeah, sure.
And thank you, Gary. It's nice to meet you.
It has been
Yeah,
wonderful.
likewise, and yeah, I hope you get better and they fix whatever's going on.
Yeah, well,
Well,
Well, it's 2 minutes to 12 here. So do we have
Oh,
any
Where
part?
how about
where you-
a concluding prayer?
Sounds good.
lead us, Tim?
Yeah.
John Grammer's turn. John, it's your turn.
In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen.
We give thee thanks for these and all the blessings that you have shed upon us. In Jesus' name we pray.
amen.
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 Thank
And
you.
you're all
You guys
blessed.
have a
Nice to meet
Have
you,
it-
Gary.
Gary,
you.
it's great connecting with you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Gary.
Thanks for being
Yeah,
with us.
thank you again for the invite.
Thank you for
Thank
being
you, Gary.
with us, Gary.
Take care.
And God
Good
bless
to
you
see you
all,
guys.
and, adios.
Okay, take care, everyone.